All right. So today I am here with Ed Burton. Ed is the youth and family pastor at the Village Church Northbrook. So really excited to chat today, Ed.
Thanks for having me on the call. It's exciting to talk with you again.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, can you tell me a bit about your background? Like what called you into ministry and how did you find your role at the Village Church?
Well, first of all, when I went to school, I went to Wheaton College. I never went there thinking I'm going to be in ministry. I became a Christian as a freshman in high school, and that was through a friend inviting me to church. And so, I mean, I
Mhm.
grew up in a home where we would have said, "Yeah, we're a Christian home." And around my fifth grade year, my mom and stepdad started going to church, and I really wasn't interested at all until a friend in my high school invited me along. So going forward, I went to Wheaton, loved it. Was very involved in my high school ministry prior to that, but I got a call from a friend, and this was when ministry became something on my radar. My friend called me up, left me a voicemail message. You know those voicemail machines we used to have
Yeah.
that recorded voicemails on. Um, and she called me up and said, "Hey, Ed, I thought of you." Because at that time, I'd been volunteering at the church heavily. I'd been leading small groups and just, but for me, I viewed myself as a volunteer, but never I could never be like a real, church person because I was,
Mm-hmm.
disqualified myself for that, and I could never be that kind of person. Well, she called me up, left me a voicemail, gave me this pitch about how she thought I could be really great for leading full time in age 4 or 5 at their church. Because at this time, the church I was a part of was fairly large. And so there was a full time role for just teaching 4 and 5 year olds.
Oh, wow.
And, and so, but what I heard on the line was, hey, um, there's a fourth and fifth grade position open. And at that time, I had a fourth and fifth grade sister, and I loved that age group. And so I called her back. Her name was Brooke, and I said, Brooke, thanks for thinking of me. And you know what? Like, I'd like to hear more about this role. Can you tell me more? And she started to talk. And as she started talking, I could figure out, wait, this doesn't sound like fourth and fifth grade. And so I said, hold up, time out. Wait, what is this role? And she said, it's for like full time for 4 and 5 year olds. And I thought, oh, Brooke, thanks so much for thinking of me, but like I'm probably not that guy. Like 4 and 5 year olds isn't my main full time jam. So I went back to work in retail hourly at that time. I was newly married. Again, heavily involved in my church, loving what was going on there. But that like call where like I had that couple hours of like, what if I worked in full time ministry, teaching and helping fourth and fifth graders? Like that really got me, and I started thinking more about it and praying about it. So for the next month and a half, I'm still doing my work, going to church, and I started getting this sense of like I need to maybe look into what it would look like to work and serve in church ministry with kids. And I had like 40 plus cousins at the time, and just still loved
Oh,
teaching
wow.
and guiding the small groups I was already leading as a volunteer. And anyway, what happened about a month and a half after that first call was a second voicemail on that same machine. And this time she called and said, "Hey, by the way, the fourth and fifth grade position just opened up." so,
Okay.
so, so it was almost like God had kind of primed my heart and my mind for like giving this a real
Mm.
consideration. And so after a month or so of interviewing and working it out, I ended up being the full time, programming director for the late childhood for fourth and fifth graders at Willow Creek, South Barrington. And that was like my first gig
Mm.
right out of college. And so it
Nice.
was just from a fire hose. And so it was a lot of action, a lot of things to do and wonderful stuff that was learned. But that's how I got my start in my call to vocational ministry. But again, I think after 2 or 3 years in high school, I became really involved in leading the younger kids at the church. In college, I served with Axis, which was like this 20 somethings ministry. I think very early on, after I became a follower, I got a sense of like, I really want to make sure I'm involved with what God's doing in the local church. I just never envisioned it being a role where I had a career there. I just thought, hey, I'll do what God's calling me to do. Now I've been in youth and family ministry since 2004, and for a while it took me to the West Coast. I worked at a church out there called Crosswinds Church, and they're now in Livermore, California.
Hmm.
Worked in a Methodist church for 3.5 years. I've had various church experiences. And so now I'm at this church, and it's through a buddy I know, Mark Ostreicher. He discovered the opening through a friend of mine, Brian, who worked with a consulting kind of headhunting firm. And it was through the senior pastor giving me a call and us figuring out that it was kind of like the perfect fit that, I ended up here at the Village Church in 2019. Um, since March 2019, I've been here and I absolutely love it here. I love what we're doing. And so, yeah, that's is concise. I probably could have made it more concise, but that's how we landed here.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. I love that story of like, hey, the 4 and 5 positions have been great. I love that age group. No, 4 and 5 years
Yeah.
old. So it's kind of like, you found out, yeah, I would like to do that, but then you actually didn't have the chance to jump in. So it's like, oh, but then it's like
Mhm.
when that actually opens, you don't have to do the whole, hey, do I want this? I already know I wanted it. Like now
Yeah.
it's here. That's
Yeah.
awesome, man. So I'm curious, that's a good segue to the next question I had, especially as someone who like was referred and kind of brought into church from a friend in high school. How does
Yeah.
that kind of change and weigh the importance on your work you do in youth ministry since you were as a youth brought in by one of your friends? How do you create experiences where the kids at Northbrook and full stuff bring their friends to church?
Well, that is the good question right now, and because the last 2 years have been so funky about bringing your friend to anything, because we had a lot of things
Mhm.
that were shut down. Um, so I guess a way to get to it, a lot of what we're doing online with churches is content, right? I mean, it's content, and content's great. I love, it's part of why we're talking on this call today, is we believe in quality, engaging content. And a lot of people are saying the last couple of years, I've learned how to go to church online. And I don't like hearing that, because that's actually a statement of, in a sense, some people are learning to say, I've learned that for me, church is about receiving content, and I'm content with it. If that's all it is, I'm content with it, and I don't think that's great. And so one of the things that I think we need to do if we are engaging kids is finding a way to really come alongside moms and dads and create cultures over time. It's way longer to create a culture than it does to create a program and to launch it and all that stuff. But
Mhm.
it reminds me of any good TV show. Like right now, if there's a really good TV show on, there's usually like a podcast midweek, right? And so like,
Uh-huh.
and then you're talking to your friends about it. You're like, oh, did you see the latest episode? And you're actually talking with people about it. My favorite shows are always shows where like you got to talk to somebody about it later, you know? And so,
Mm.
and it's maybe a weird way to get around to it, but like if our content is just something that people finish and they're like done, and it doesn't involve helping them to face each other, to meet up, to be in a small group, to serve together, to show up, then we're maybe not embodying the body of Christ as much as we're doing a great job of listening to good stuff, which I'm all about it.
Mm.
But it's not church, I think, if we're just receiving great information. If that's
Mm.
fair. So how do we do it? How do we get people in the same space? It's been a challenge. We do have Friday nights here for our teenagers where every other Friday or so, we have this thing called Friday Night Live, and we pull like any kid from the community plus a bunch of kids from Chicago, because we're about 25 minutes from a neighborhood called Rogers Park. And a bunch of their young people come up here. One time I even went down with our church bus and brought them up here. A bunch of the kids from our community obviously show up. It's basically 2 hours of straight chaos games, but then like in the middle there's some kind of food, pizza, there's a devotional moment for like about 20 minutes, and we're doing our best to introduce faith and to sort of give people something real in the middle of that fun that maybe they didn't expect. And we're encouraging our people to reach out to their friends, to bring them to our summer activities, but really like the summer of 2019, prior to all the chaos, our whole summer schedule had nothing to do with the building here. Everything was in homes. It was like, we're going to meet at Nate's, we're going to meet at Brianna's. Like we were at the park. And so we tried to decentralize, coming here, because coming here was not bad. And we came here on Sunday mornings, and we still come here on Sunday mornings, obviously for worship. But the more we can be in the community with the kids on their turf, the better. And so the challenge is like, well, one, with COVID still, not everyone's super okay with inviting a bunch of teenagers over to their basement, and so
Mhm.
that's a roadblock. But we're starting to see that peel away. Plus, weather's nicer, so we can use backyards. But I mean, I was invited because a friend invited me to church. I didn't go because mom and dad told me to. I didn't go because I was seeking God. At the time, I'd say
Mhm.
it took me about 3 months of listening to the teacher at the time at the church share the youth ministry, and then being in a couple small group discussions. It took me a good 3 months to kind of go, oh, there's something really real to this. There's like I'm
Mhm.
I'm getting more than I bargained for by investigating this church activity thing. And it takes relationships. It takes people, who not only want to have you with them, but also want you to know Jesus. And that's part of the reason they're bringing you, not just because they need a buddy, like, oh, I don't want to go alone. Like, that's great. But we also,
Mhm.
we want to help develop kids that have spiritual friendships. And anyway, so there's a little bit about how we can maybe do that. Again, the content should just be the icing on the cake, right? We want to help kids have great teaching and hear great music, but we want them to have spiritual friendships, and we want mom and dad to model that. And so there's no one silver bullet. It's like there's many fronts here, many beach fronts that we're trying to work on as we emerge from COVID. So hopefully some of that's helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. So pulling on that thread, because you mentioned, your story, you were like at church for a good 3 months before you said, hey, I think there's something more to this. So you really highlight relationships as being a key part of that. And that is, really the purpose of ministry. And so what tips do you have for kind of cultivating those relationships, not only with your staff and volunteers, but cultivating them with uh, parents, kids, like having kids cultivate them with each other. Like, what tips do you have for fostering those?
Yeah, good question. Um, It really starts as early as one of the things I would tell youth ministers, like if we're just talking youth ministry, and this is just advice I was given by a guy named Brandon like 15 years ago. So I'm just like relaying something he taught me. I got
Absolutely.
to a new town. I got to a new town, and I'm like, hey, I'm trying to engage these, parents of these teenagers I've got, and how do I help them to want their kid to know Jesus, basically, because I think at that time a lot of the kids that I was with, their parents were just really content with their kid. Well, church was a morality factory. Church is where I sent my kid to become a good kid,
Mhm.
and you could like pluck Jesus out of it, and I think a lot of them would have been just fine with it. So it's like I was struggling with, how do I mean, because I don't want to just be like driving the ship and saying, hey, I want your kids to know Jesus, and they're like, well, just keep them busy and entertained, and also make them do good stuff, but that Jesus stuff is okay. They might want that, they might not want that. And so I was like, oh man, how do I help in fact change there? And Brandon said, love them, listen to them, serve them as best you can, and then focus on the parents of current second through fourth graders. And I'm
Okay.
like, but I'm like the youth minister, right? He's like, yes, you need to like help cast a vision for like where they're headed, and ask them the earlier questions, like ask ask mom and dad, what is your vision for your child's spiritual growth? Like, how do you want to see them grow in the faith? What does that look like for you? What would you want? And in a way is when you have that conversation, you sometimes see, eyebrows raised, and you kind of go, they go, I don't know. I haven't really thought
Uh-huh.
of it. It's not something I've thought about. I just know I want them to have what I had. I hear that a lot. Parents want their kids to have the thing they had when they were kids, which is like this solid, loving community that surrounds them. And it's just not the way it was in the early 90s or late 80s. It's church is different. People don't show up in a community now and find their bank, find their YMCA, find their kid's school, and find a church to go to. Like, it's not a given anymore. It's very intentional.
Mhm.
And and when it comes
Mhm.
to making friends, so friends are often made on mission trips, retreats, um, big, camps. That's often when friendships are made if they're not already there, and then they get sustained throughout the year. So it's really important for you to do all you can to make those events pretty populated, so that friendships can forge. Sure, a friend can be made at church over that hour and a half per week for 5 months. Like that can happen, but like really, it's a lot easier to take 2.5 days and create a lot of conversation and activities. And that's like the way C.S. Lewis talks about friendships being made, where it's like it's that moment when you discover, oh, you too. I thought I was the only one. Like it's like when that
Uh-huh.
wall finally comes down and people start to talk to each other. You gotta have extended time together, and so it's been that's part of why COVID's been such a bear, is because we haven't had the chance to do the kind of friendship forming activities. And also, I think one of the biggest things is when I was a freshman in high school, the people who invited me to church were actually older than me. And then as I grew in my faith early on, it was Jason Arndt, it was Jeremy Sullivan, it was Chris Haw. These are the people, the upperclassmen, that like paid attention to me. And although I heard my youth pastor teaching about Jesus, and I heard, them sharing, and I'm like, oh, these are great people. I look up to them. I didn't ever think like, oh, like they're untouchable. They're like these amazing big, but this guy who goes to my high school, like I can get behind that. Like, I feel like I can see how it looks. And so what we really need in youth ministry, especially right now in any church, is a upper class that really gets their role and gets that whether they want to be or not. When they walk in the room, they may as well be wearing a cape, because these freshmen and these middle schoolers see you and they're going to want to like learn from you. They're going to watch you, for better for worse. They're going to like see how you behave. So like, how do you live into that more fully? Because youth ministry isn't adults teaching kids. Youth ministry is youth reaching other youth. That's actual youth
Mhm.
ministry. And so to try to
Mhm.
churches that will struggle with reaching their kids, if they think all I have to do is get this army of adults to like teach these kids and pour into these kids. And again, we should mentor and teach kids. But if we're not raising up young leaders, if we're not developing kids who want to develop other kids, who see their friends who may or may not know Jesus, and like ache for them and go, I want them to have the freedom that the Christian faith invites us to. I want them to know Jesus and follow Jesus and have life that's really life. Like I want that for them in such a way that I'd invite them along. For us to find a way to cultivate and disciple kids that land there in their faith and have that desire, because then a ministry can really grow and thrive, because you've got teens reaching teens, not just people like me trying to pretend they know all the coolest TikTok dances, which I don't know any of them. I've never known them. I never will know them. I just know that they exist. Like I'm walking down the park, and there's like kids with their phones out, all like dancing
Mhm.
and stuff. Like I'm 40 now. I'm not cool anymore. So I need to recruit younger, cooler kids who can definitely like, relate better to teenagers. But I want to resource them and support them and help them to have all they need as they disciple other kids and, cultivate a community, right? And you can't just
Mhm.
do it online. You can't. It's just not, I don't think. I think you can't only do it online. Is it a great resource? Yes. But we need to see each other in person. So anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, that is a lot of great advice there, Ed. And really like that, like youth teaching youth. It's, you know, kind of the number one thing a youth pastor could probably have in their head is, um, and it's kind of just like, hey, how can I create word of mouth in my ministry? So that is very important. And really appreciate the all the advice you have shared today, Ed. So I'm curious, what just kind of other advice do you have for youth and kids pastors?
Um, like pray a bunch about, you know, uh, gosh, I think we get really we're suckers for the newest book or the latest tool, and sometimes if we're not focusing on our own walk and our own growth, who we're becoming, it all gets kind kind of lost in the weeds. Like, I think the best thing you can have for your church as a youth minister is a healthy youth minister. So
Mm.
like
Uh-huh.
if you can as far as you have the ability, right, like to stay healthy and stay on your knees before the Lord, to be open, to not get too lost in the tasks, but to really make sure you're making time to care for your soul and to be around other people that can speak the truth to you in a loving way, that you evaluate what you do, like invite adults, invite kids to share their thoughts and ideas and concerns. Have humility when you receive it, and like tweak things when you can and make adjustments, but invite people along to lead alongside and with you. um, yeah, I'd say, I guess stuff I've already mentioned. I've already talked too much, so it's like a couple things. Yeah, be pay attention to your own walk with the Lord, and know that that'll carry so much along with it. As you model and share your faith with the kids and teach, and also just have a system by which you're allowing feedback and evaluation, and then act on it. Don't just gather info and go, thanks for your feedback, and then like not make adjustments. Experiment all the time. In one of my former churches, one of our core values was, everything is an experiment. And I think that's a cool way to approach stuff. So if we're trying something new, guess what? We're just doing this experiment for the summer. We're going to see how it goes, and because it is, nothing we're going to do is somehow in solid, in stone. It's not unmovable. We're going to try things, and so and if you try something, stick with it for a while. Don't just bail on it if it doesn't work right away. Pray about it, get people around it, take feedback, and if you want to initiate a new change, let it cook for a while. Don't just bail if it doesn't work the first weekend. Sometimes things take a little time. But yeah, those are some
Absolutely.
thoughts. I just,
Oh
a
yeah.
few. I'll stop there. If you ever want to do round two, we can talk more. But I'll spare everybody from more of this.
Oh, good. Yeah, well, everything is an experiment is a great value to have.
Yeah.
And yeah, and part of the experiment, like you said, is not giving up the first time iteration one didn't work. So there's obviously the Edison quote about 1,000 attempts to make the light bulb.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
more realistically, perhaps the guy that was responsible for products like the iPod said, hey, every product needs 3 versions for it to work. Like the
Right.
first iPhone, it didn't have an app store on it. Like, could you
No.
imagine like what this would be like if you couldn't have apps? So
Right.
absolutely, that is spectacular advice, Ed. Thank you so much for sharing so much today.
Well, thanks for the chance to share about it. I mean, it's fun, and as we get out of COVID malaise, and as we get back to things as we're used to getting to them, it's important that leaders connect. And one of the things I haven't had the chance to do, I mean, I was here for about a year before COVID hit, and I was really focused on like developing the structure here with the adults in the church, and the students. But once COVID hit, like, I mean, I normally get to know my neighbors better. I normally make partnerships. I'm like, how do I connect with other people? So it's been fun connecting with you and getting to know Playlister, and also learning about, some of the other tools that are available, as well as the people behind them, which is really fun. So thanks, man.
Absolutely appreciate it.